The fall of Vladimir Putin may not come from NATO, or from Ukraine, or even from the streets of Moscow. It may come from the very organization that was created to protect the Russian state itself. For years, Western media has painted Putin as an unshakable strongman, the kind of leader who could bend Russia's institutions to his will and crush any opposition. We've seen this image reinforced in countless headlines. Putin as the master of chess, always one step ahead, untouchable at home, feared abroad. But the truth emerging from inside Russia tells a very different story. A story of a crumbling economy, a failed war effort, and a deep fracture within the Russian elite that could ultimately turn Russia's most powerful intelligence agency, the FSB, into Putin's greatest enemy. So, let's break it down. Back in 2023, when the war in Ukraine dragged into its second year, Putin faced a shocking challenge to his authority. Yevgeny Prigozhin, the head of the Wagner mercenary group, launched a mutiny that briefly threatened to topple Moscow's control. Tanks rolled toward the capital, Russian elites panicked, and for a moment, it looked like the Kremlin itself was vulnerable. Putin managed to survive, but the message was clear. His grip on power wasn't as ironclad as the world thought. And not long after, Prigozhin died in what the Kremlin called a plane crash. For Putin's enemies, it was a warning. For his allies, it was a reminder that loyalty was no longer optional, it was a matter of survival. But here's what they don't tell you. That rebellion was just the tip of the iceberg. Because while the Wagner fiasco grabbed international headlines, a much quieter, more dangerous shift was already underway inside Russia's security establishment. The FSB, the Federal Security Service, the modern successor to the KGB, was positioning itself not just as Putin's loyal enforcer, but as the ultimate power broker for the day when Putin is gone. To understand this, you have to look at the storm brewing inside Russia. Economically, the country is on the brink. Despite propaganda claiming resilience in the face of Western sanctions, Russia's state budget is collapsing. Government salaries go unpaid, the ruble continues to weaken. And according to recent reports, more than 13% of Russian households can now afford nothing but basic food. That's not stability, that's desperation. Meanwhile, the war effort in Ukraine has drained Russia's manpower. The early calls for patriotic volunteers dried up long ago. Now the Kremlin relies on threats, intimidation, and outright coercion to fill its ranks. Security forces raid airports to catch draft dodgers. Young men hide or flee the country rather than fight. This isn't the image of a nation united behind its leader, it's the portrait of a state running out of options. And in this environment of chaos, the FSB is quietly building its power. On the surface, it looks like they're doing Putin's dirty work. They oversee purges in the military, prosecuting generals accused of corruption or treason. They monitor dissent, crack down on critics, and enforce loyalty. But behind the scenes, these purges serve another purpose. They give the FSB leverage over the military hierarchy. Every general who owes his career to the FSB, every officer who knows his survival depends on the agency's approval, becomes a piece on the board that the FSB can move when the time comes. Think about what that means. If Putin were to die suddenly or step down, who decides what comes next? The Russian constitution has rules, but rules mean little in a system where raw power decides everything. With its control over the military's leadership and its massive domestic surveillance apparatus, the FSB would be in a position to dictate the choice of Russia's next president. And they wouldn't need to put forward a charismatic leader of their own. They could simply install a puppet, a figurehead who answers to them. But here's the darker possibility. What if the FSB decides not to wait? What if they conclude that Putin's failures, the economic collapse, the humiliations on the battlefield, the unrest at home, have made him more of a liability than an asset? In that case, the agency could act on its own. It could orchestrate a transition of power, frame it as a necessary step to save Russia from the consequences of Putin's war, and legitimize itself as the country's true stabilizing force. And if that happens, Russia would enter the most dangerous internal fracture it has seen since the days of Joseph Stalin. We've seen echoes of this before in Russian history. Stalin himself rose to power through purges and manipulation of the party apparatus. Nikita Khrushchev was ousted by his own colleagues in a palace coup. Even Boris Yeltsin, often remembered as the architect of post-Soviet democracy, fell out of favor as elites maneuvered behind the scenes to replace him with someone more reliable. That someone, of course, was Vladimir Putin. So the real question now is this: is Putin simply repeating history? Has he built a system so ruthless and dependent on loyalty that it now threatens to consume him the way it consumed those before him? For the average Russian citizen, these struggles among elites might feel distant, almost irrelevant compared to the daily challenges of survival. But the consequences are massive. If the FSB takes control, Russia could transform into an even more repressive surveillance state, where intelligence chiefs rule from the shadows, and the presidency is nothing more than theater. Alternatively, the chaos of a power struggle could weaken Moscow so badly that it invites new instability across the region, from Central Asia to Eastern Europe. And make no mistake, the world would feel the shockwaves. A fractured Russia, nuclear-armed and struggling with internal legitimacy, is not just a domestic issue, it's a global crisis waiting to happen. NATO, Ukraine, China all would have to recalculate their strategies in a landscape where the Kremlin's future is uncertain. But for now, the purges continue, generals fall, rivals disappear, and the FSB tightens its grip. To the outside world, it looks like Putin consolidating his power. Inside Russia, though, it might be something far more dangerous. The slow preparation for a post-Putin Russia, orchestrated not by the people, not by reformers, but by the very intelligence machine that once kept him safe. So here's the paradox. Putin's attempts to secure his legacy might be the very thing that destroys it. By empowering the FSB to eliminate his rivals and police the military, he's given them the tools to decide his fate. And when the time comes, whether by death, resignation, or betrayal, they may not just be ready to act. They may already have the plan in place. The purge has a purpose. And the real winner in this deadly game may not be Putin at all, it may be the FSB. So let me leave you with this question. If Russia's most powerful intelligence agency decides to remove Putin, what kind of Russia will emerge from the shadows? A more stable empire of spies, or a fractured state stumbling into chaos? If you want to dive deeper into this internal fracture, check out our video on Putin's war against his own generals and how the FSB is devouring Russia from within. And if you found this analysis valuable, don't forget to subscribe, hit the like button, and share your thoughts in the comments below. Because what happens in Moscow's back rooms won't just shape Russia's future, it could reshape the entire world.